Welcome to the Develop Great Managers podcast, where you can learn directly from the experts. I'm Dale Ferrario, your host. For more information and valuable insights, go to developgreatmanagers.com. Now, on to the show. Hi, and thanks for listening to this week's podcast. I want to talk about something that's really relevant to managers, and this is about how to prepare for the new normal. And as you all know, we are in an incredibly unique situation. I've never seen anything like this before in my life, but we've just been through the beginning of COVID-19. What's happened so far is that we heard about it. We heard about it coming from China. Maybe we heard about it moving from China to Europe and making its way to the US. Certainly in the Silicon Valley where I live, we believe it came from China. On the East Coast, they think it actually made its way from Europe. But regardless of where it came from, it's made its way over here. When it first hit, we really didn't know what to do about it, and we lost control. This whole thing about R0 and how many people it spreads to, well, this virus spreads pretty quickly. So the R0 was pretty high. We were spreading that disease very quickly, and we very quickly lost control. We lost control mostly in the bigger cities where people live closer together. So in Washington State, in the Silicon Valley, other parts of California, we lost control, but we pretty quickly put in place a number of measures to take control back, or at least to slow things back down. On the East Coast, in New York in particular, they really lost control. That's a very dense place, and the virus was spreading incredibly quickly. So they lost control, and they've had a much harder time bringing it back under control. But if you look now across the whole United States, in general, we've flattened that curve. We brought it under control. The virus is no longer really controlling us. We're starting to control the virus. Everybody's getting a little bit impatient. We've stopped the economy so that everybody could shelter in place so that we could bring this under control. Now we have to figure out, how do we restart the economy again? How do we slowly let things happen while keeping control, while not losing that control and not seeing the number of people that are infected grow like crazy? So what's about to happen is each state, and in some ways each city, is trying to figure out, how do we gradually reopen, how do we track what's going on, and how do we make sure that we're safe as we go through this reopening of the country. Now, there's an incredible amount of risk in reopening the country. And like I said earlier, if we lose control, then we might have to go backwards. We might have to put that shelter in place back so that we can get control again. And nobody wants that. So let's assume we can manage this thing, that we can slowly open things back up, and that we can all go back to work. And you in particular, as managers, can start to go back to whatever that new normal is going to look like. And what I want to talk about is, I want to talk about that new normal, and I want to help you think about, how are you going to move from where we are today to that new normal? How are you going to help your team, and how are you going to effectively manage? So I really want to talk about this in terms of 5 different areas. The first area is going to be about screening and testing. The second one's going to be about more space, kind of social distancing at work. The third is going to be about masks, the use of masks. The fourth one is about conference rooms. And the fifth one is going to be continued work at home. So let's jump into the first one. Let's talk about screening and testing. So ideally, every company would do testing of every person on a regular basis to make sure that they do not have any disease, they're not bringing it in, and they're not spreading it. That seems incredibly unlikely to me. It's expensive. It takes a lot of time. We just don't have enough tests. So I don't believe we're going to be able to effectively test everybody at the frequency that we need in order to reopen back up. But I think mostly what we're going to do is we're going to do screening. And we're going to screen people when they come into work to determine whether we think they might have the virus. And if they have the virus, turn around and go back home. That screening is going to look like taking your temperature. It's going to look like asking you some questions about how you feel. And if there's any risk, if there's any indication that you might have the virus, send you back home, let you work from there, and let you quarantine. So that's going to change kind of how we engage and how we come to work. So you as a manager, what do you need to do? There's a couple things you need to do. First of all, you need to make sure that everyone is aware that there continues to be a very high risk with COVID-19. They just all need to know this is not over. So pay careful attention. The second one is, if anybody on your team doesn't feel well, stay home. Don't come into work. Stay home, work from home, self-quarantine, and then make sure that when you come back, you're feeling better. And then the third thing is, everybody really must understand what the guidelines are, what the rules are at your company, and they need to follow those rules. So now let's talk about the second area, and that's going to be about more space. So that's really going to be about social distancing at work. So what I think is going to happen is companies are going to restructure the workspace. They're going to look at how close together desks are. I'm in high tech. Many of you are in high tech as well. High tech oftentimes will take a big space and will put a lot of desks close together. Many of those desks will actually have some hydraulics so people can sit down, stand up, but they're close together. That's probably not going to work. So what they're either going to do is they're either going to move people further apart, meaning there's going to be less desks, or they're just going to say, let's use maybe every other space and let's move people apart in that way. So that's going to change the dynamics of how people are used to working together. So what do you need to do as a manager? First of all, and as I said before, understand and support the company's guidelines. Don't be the one who's trying to fit more people in closer because that's how your team works. Make sure everyone on your team understands the rules and follow those rules. In addition to that, you need to think about how you're going to interact with your team. It might have been that you used to walk around and say hi to everybody and chat with them, hang out in their little area. That's probably not going to work. So you're going to have to think about, do I walk by, keep more distance? How do I stay connected with the people that are working for me that are actually in the building? And the last thing, and it's probably a little bit counterintuitive, is you're probably more prepared right now to work with the people, to stay connected with the people who are remote. So don't forget, the people that now are sitting close to you, they need your attention as well. So just don't forget that. The next area I want to cover is the use of masks. I think it's a good chance that not only are you going to be screened, but they may ask you at your work to wear masks, or at least to wear masks whenever you're in an area where other people are, where there isn't enough room for good social distancing. So you may be asked every time you leave your office or leave your designated area, put a mask on. Only walk through the halls with masks on. If you go to the bathroom, put a mask on. Certainly, if you're going to the cafeteria, put a mask on. Now, how are we going to eat in that situation? They're going to have to think about creating the space where people can eat, or maybe you bring that back to your cube or your office or whatever you might have. But I think people are going to be wearing masks. When they wear masks, it's oftentimes harder to hear the person. It's a little bit mumbled, right? And some people, it's already difficult to understand them. So you're going to have to really make sure, speak up, and then make sure that you're listening carefully so that you can understand what others say. You might have to make sure and remind somebody, speak up, or I couldn't hear you. Could you be more clear? Just make sure that you give people time and the chance to be able to engage. I've seen most people doing that anyway. They really listen when you have a mask on. They're trying really hard, but just make sure that you do that. So in this area, again, what should you do? Continue to follow the company guidelines. If you need to wear a mask in certain places, wear that mask. As I mentioned, as a manager, people may be frustrated. Masks are not very comfortable. Just recognize that. Be open and honest. Listen to what they have to say, and don't allow them to violate the rules, but be sensitive. Maybe say, okay, if it's bothering you, maybe go in a place where you can take it off for a while. Just be supportive. That's overall what you need to do as a manager in general, and now is a time where you probably need to do that more than ever. Next on the list, no conference rooms. So we're getting pretty used to not having conference rooms anyway. So going back to work, people might be thinking, hey, it's just going to be back to business as usual. We're going to have our regular meetings in a conference room. It's a different way to interact. I think people are comfortable with it. That's probably not going to happen. So you already know how to do this. You've been doing it anyway while people are at home. The only difference now is you're going to have some people at work, some people at home. Just use similar practices to what you've been using. You can't count on those conference rooms anymore, so go ahead and do more virtual meetings and just continue to manage in that way like you have over the last few weeks. The next one I think is actually a really big one, and that's continued work at home. So as we move back to this new normal, I don't believe that everybody is just going to come back into work. One of the reasons is that there isn't enough room with good social distancing to have everybody come back and go back to working the way they did before. So I think the companies are going to say, let's split this. Let's have some people come in and some people stay at home. On top of that, a lot of people are just going to want to stay home anyway. They've now realized how nice it is to not have to get in your car, drive all the way to work, fighting the traffic, losing that time, and then work all day and then turn around and have to fight that traffic back home. So I think a bunch of people are going to realize this is kind of a nice way to work. And they've learned, and you've learned, how to work together, how to manage each other, how to work with other people in your organization. So I think that work from home has now become a viable option for many people. And I wrote a little bit about this with a podcast and a post earlier. And when I wrote about it, I was assuming you had the option as to whether people worked at home or worked in the office. You didn't have that option. Everybody had to leave. We all had to learn how to work from home and how to interact with each other. So we've made huge progress. Some of those people, like I said, are probably going to want to stay home. So you're going to have a new environment where more people are working at home than they did before. In the office are going to be more spread out, and probably you'll have some switching. Some people will work at home some days and will come into the office. Other people will work in the office some days and then go work from home. And so you're going to have this dynamic environment that you're going to have to deal with. So really, what should you do? And the good news is you actually know how to do this. You're just applying what you've learned from having managed people at work and what you've learned having managed people at home into this new, and I'll call it a hybrid model, where some people are at home, some people are at work, and you have to deal with that environment. So you actually already know how to do it. You're going to have to deal with the fact that these people may be coming in for some days and going back and working at home other days, but I think you'll learn how to adjust. So just use what you already know and kind of do the best job you can, and I'm confident you'll be able to do it. So I think I should probably just do a quick conclusion here. What did we talk about? We talked about how things are going to change, and some of those big items that are going to change are there's going to be screening and testing. There's going to be more space. You're going to have to make space so that people can be further apart, so they can have social distancing at work. People are going to be wearing masks. We're not sure where they're going to have to wear those masks, but I expect at work, people will be wearing the masks, and you're going to have to deal with that. You aren't going to be able to use your conference rooms. And you're going to have this unique split of people at home and at work. That hybrid model is something you're going to have to learn how to manage. So you as a manager, I wanted to narrow it down to just a couple things that I think are really, really important as this change takes place. First and foremost, make sure everybody understands the company's rules and guidelines and make sure that everybody follows them. You need to do a great job of being that role model now more than ever. If someone on your team doesn't feel good, make sure they stay home. Make sure they stay home while they don't feel good, and they stay home long enough to quarantine to make sure that they're not bringing anything back in. And be super sensitive right now. Listen to what people have to say. Everybody is going through this in their own way, and you as their manager and their leader just really need to be there to support them, to understand, and to help. So I'm really confident that you'll be able to do this. As I said before, you've managed people at work, now you've managed people at home, and what we've got to do is manage in this new hybrid way. And this new hybrid way with a whole bunch of things that are unique and different. But I'm confident you'll be able to make that transition. So I want to leave with a quote, and I really like this from Bill Gates. I don't think he was thinking about the coronavirus at the time, but here's what he said. Success today requires the agility and drive to constantly rethink, reinvigorate, react, and reinvent. This is a time like no other, and I'm confident you'll be able to do it. So thank you again for listening. I hope you got a lot out of this, and I'll talk to you next week. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard, there are more podcasts available on developgreatmanagers.com, on iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have time, please post a comment, or better yet, please write a review. Talk to you in the next podcast.